I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, June the 8th, brought to you in part by Joplin Regional Stockyards, the most progressive auction market in the nation. They offer commingling, they offer video marketing, just about anything you can imagine there at Joplin Regional Stockyards. And here this Monday, they've got 7,000 head on offer, starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, as they like to get done in good time. Slaughter returning to more normal this past week, and it's the first semi-normal week we've had in months, as we've got the kill back well over 600,000. Not that we're gaining on the deficit that we've lost, but we are kind of keeping up a little bit. Not as big as the same week a year ago, but a fairly typical week there. But a lot of different things going on this past week. If you guys were paying attention, we continued to see more sign up and payments being made from the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. Guys are getting some help there, and that's a good thing. We wish that maybe they would have used some of that money, or maybe some additional funds to help put some of these smaller packing plants that are trying to get in the works of getting up and going, to help give them a helping hand there, but we didn't see that. We know that we're backed up big time on our slaughter cattle because we've had such a slowdown in our slaughter for the past 2 months at least there, but we know that the cattle are getting big out there. A lot of the formula yards out there are the worst shape there. They've got some cattle that should have been sold at least 6 weeks and maybe 2 months ago. But we're seeing signs of some of those cattle moving through the system as our quality grading, which is all about marbling, and it tends or always increases the more days of feed you have on them, and it is not really take into account how heavy the carcasses are like yield grade does. But quality grading hit an all-time record high this past week, and you might think that's a good thing, but it gives us signs that we're really backed up. Our carcass weights were 52 pounds heavier than the same time a year ago, because we're normally in a downtrend right now with a lot of calf feds hitting the market, but with those cattle being on feed for a longer amount of time because we weren't able to get them scheduled in and moving off the show list, that we're seeing those heavy carcasses now, where normally we see heavier carcasses in the fall of the year after your big heavy summer yearlings come off, and they grow to a heavier weight much more easily. But what else did we see? The biggest news we've seen in months and months and years, something that we're really happy about, is the USDA announced, and it was with the government, that the DOJ, Department of Justice, not just the Packers and Stockyards or something like that, but something with some teeth to it. The DOJ announced that they have put out subpoenas to your big four packers. This is all come about from the investigations that we saw. We saw a lot of the attorneys general from 11 states initially, and even more joined in after that, wanting to do some investigating about price fixing, unfair trade practices, gouging through the crisis, but a lot of antitrust violations. But these subpoenas were all about potential antitrust violations from your big four packers. This come right on the heels of earlier in the week. We saw Pilgrim's Pride have indictments placed against them from DOJ about price fixing and the like on chicken. So maybe they're getting serious about this and kind of holding these guys to account of what they did during the pandemic crisis and the panic buying and the like and everything. We saw monster box beef cutout values as your packers were gouging people at their most vulnerable point then, when they were at their panic buying because they were afraid they weren't going to have enough food to feed their family. And the worst thing about it, which I've told you guys time and time again, the worst thing about it is that it subsequently hurt overall beef demand, especially domestically here, because people just got sticker shock when they went in to buy their favorite cuts of beef, and it's going to cause them to back off. It has caused them to back off, and likely they found some alternatives to tide them over, and that's what really hurts. It trickles down to your cattlemen, all the way down to your cow-calf producers whenever they're gouging like that, and people can't afford to buy the protein that they want. That's what hurts, is when they hurt your overall beef demand, and we hate that. But we saw a little bit more charity bids come out from your packers. Your packers the last several weeks have been coming out with charity bids, putting the good face forward for these DOJ investigations. And now that we've seen subpoenas come out, maybe they backed off of that because they figure, well, the time period that they're looking at has already passed by, or whatever, and most of your packers backed off of those charity bids, and as we've seen the box beef cutout values plunge, as we knew they would have to. I mean, we talked all about it as they were going up. We knew that they would come back down just as fast or faster, and they have. Likely this week they will get down to the point where we were when we started the coronavirus pandemic and all the panic buying and everything that ensued after that. But we did see one packer coming out and continuing with charity bids really late in the week to try to kind of show good faith, or at least make it look good. But we've kind of got back to the point where we're getting close to normal, and we're just happy about that. You know, we're happy with supply and demand. We really want demand, and we want people to be happy with the product that they're getting. As far as beef, what I'm saying here, we want it to be affordable to them. What we really want is to get a fair percentage of the retail beef price, and that hasn't happened for a long time. Maybe if some of these investigations bring about some change there. I know we continue to talk about wanting to do some things to change the industry. The one that I've really pushed is mandating a minimum requirement of negotiated cash trade. We've got a bill that's before the Senate right now, and it's put forth by a guy that has a lot of pull there. Senator Chuck Grassley there out of Iowa. He's got a bill up there with John Tester from Montana, so it's bipartisan. We're wanting more and more of your politicals to get behind that. We want you guys to get excited about that. Call your senators, call your representatives, and start getting some things going on that, because we really feel like it would save the industry. Although a lot of your biggest industry voices are coming out against it, because they also represent the packers, and we know that the packers would not like that at all. But we feel kind of good about the way things are going, as we're getting back to normal. You know, we saw such horrible rioting and violence and everything that happened this last week, and we just feel terrible about that. And we felt like you know, some of those protesters and rioters and the like were getting a foothold. And then late in the week we saw that their big shout out was that they want to defund the police. That shows the ignorance right there. So what do they want to happen whenever they get in a jam? Something bad happened to a family member. They've had a wreck. They've been broke into. There's some violence there. Somebody's doing something completely outside the law. They call 911, and what? Nobody there to answer? Who do they think is going to answer the phone if they defund the police and they call 911? Your most foolish people of all, and the ones that lash out against law and order, are usually also the first ones to call the cops when they get into a jam. And we see that time and time again. But you guys know all that. There's no need for me to go on talking about that. I always give you guys some of the highest selling cattle in the country. You know, what cattle could, at the complete maximum amount of market to what they'll bring. Occasionally I like to come in and tell you guys about some commodity cattle that you can buy that might have a chance to make some money. And my good old buddy Ellison Carter down there in Santo, Texas, he shares with us some prices on some cattle that he shipped from time to time, and I like to share those with you to tell you what you could pay for some put together cattle. Surely plenty good enough, and all these ones that I'm going to give you the price on were sure good enough kind of cattle, good enough kind of cattle to turn out and graze, good enough kind of cattle to feed, and could still bring the top of the market when they get fat. But some cattle that are affordable that you might make some money on. But out of Ellison Carter Cattle Company out of Santo, Texas, these are some of the strings that he shipped this week out of the Central Texas barns that he buys in. He's got order buyers sitting in all those barns, puts those cattle together. These are all delivered prices, likely delivered to your major grazing areas. You guys way up in the northern plains and the Midwest might be a little bit more freight on them, but these would be several hundred miles delivered prices here that I'm going to give you. But on steer calves, had several of them weighing 4 1/4 as a base price there, bring $158. These would be good cattle. 500-pound steers shipped and delivered at $140. Some 560-pound steers shipped out on Sunday at $137, and then he had several loads of big feeder steers, and there was more of those bigger cattle in those Central Texas barns as those guys have been kind of backing off and holding those cattle and getting some sizable cattle in those barns, but several cattle there weighing 8 1/4 shipped out and delivered for $120. On the heifers, some 300-pounders at $140. 350-pound heifers at $136 delivered. Some 450-pound heifers bring $130, and 500-pound heifers at $127, and had a pretty good slug of bigger heifers, feeding type heifers weighing 800 pounds at $1 even right there. If you're interested in any of those cattle, you can go to his website and find some contact information at EllisonCarterCattle.com, and Ellison is Ellison. Let's talk about your board for last week. June live cattle futures, Monday was down $1.42, Tuesday down the $3 limit. Wednesday started to come back around, up 15 cents. Thursday was up 27. Friday back off $1.82. And your June live cattle futures, a lot of it due to the absence of the charity bids, ended the week at $93.90, down $5.82. That's a pretty big loss on your spot live cattle futures. August, not down as hard and selling at a pretty decent premium to June, which does not make any sense. I talked about that all this past week. As we know, we're getting into bigger supplies and there's going to be a lot of cattle backed up. We were dreading late this summer, even before the coronavirus started, but your August live cattle futures sitting at $96.17, down $3.43. August feeder cattle up 77 on Monday, down 270. Tuesday was a rough day on the board for cattle this last week, but Tuesday, August feeder cattle were down 270. Wednesday was up 80. Thursday up 50 cents. Friday down 55. August feeder cattle contracts ended the week at $134.17, down $1.18. September ended the week at $135.47, down just 10 cents. Your fat cattle trade was pretty active, and every day this past week, again, we saw a huge negotiated cash movement, and that's had a lot to do with holding these charity bids up there as high as we have, because so much of it's been negotiated, and guys are kind of having to hold the market to keep cattle moving. They haven't been buying as many of the formula cattle because they've ended up coming back costing the packers more than what the cash negotiated cash cattle are costing, even at the charity levels. But let's talk about your movement through Thursday was 101,200 head. That's big through Thursday, and we had more sales on Friday. I'll tell you about here in a minute, but that 101,200 head compares to 85,500 through Thursday a week ago, and through Thursday a year ago was only 73,300 head, and that's when everything was up and going and normal. But your cash sales of live steers and heifers through Thursday this past week were 105 to 118. Your weighted average through Thursday was running about 112.5. But overall, that'd be $2 to $7 lower, and that's just through Thursday. We saw some lower prices yet on Friday as your fat cattle trade is falling. It's getting lower progressively. Your dress sales, steers and heifers last week ranged from 170 to 187 with a weighted average through Thursday of around 179. That was sure $3 to $4 lower on a dress basis. Friday we had additional trade. Couple loads in Iowa confirmed at 175. And that was kind of in the lower end of the price range there. Nebraska, 1,600 head sold, mostly at 110. And that would have been at the bottom of the range in the northern plains and in the Midwest there at 110. So those loftier price levels were not available on Friday. Kansas didn't have any confirmed sales on Friday to speak of, or through the first part of the day where they had to report it to mandatory price reporting. We'll likely pick up a few more sales because I heard of some more movement happening late Friday afternoon. Texas, 2,100 head from $1 to $1.10, and there was significant trade at $1 in Texas on Friday. And you think if that 118 or 115 or 110 was available, why would they take $1? But then also late on Friday, I heard some more of those charity bids, likely from Cargill. They've been the ones that's been trying to hold things together the most and look the best, and they have looked the best through all this crisis here. But heard some 114 in the Southern Plains on Friday afternoon. Why they would give 114 when they could buy all the cattle they wanted at $1.10? Like I said, it's all about the charity and making themselves look good. But we'll see how much of that developed. We don't really have a good feel for it, but did hear from several sources that there was some 114 out there in the Southern Plains late Friday. Box beef cutout values, I've told you, they've dropped like a rock, and they had to. They just lofted them up there so high, and they've got to get back down there to realization. But your weighted average on choice cuts all of last week, all of them put together, your weighted average choice cut price, $297.91, down $76.14 for choice cuts all of last week. But it was even quite a bit lower than that on Friday. It was all the way down to $261.48. It's got to get down below $210 to really get to the point where it was when we first started seeing the effects of the coronavirus. Select cuts, your weighted average for all of last week, $278.20, down $70.39 from the weighted average from the previous week. But on Friday, your latest market on select cuts was $246.42, so it's dropped a ton. But the choice select spread on your weighted average prices there was $19.71. Pretty impressive movement of 756 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. The beef is moving. If we can keep these workers coming into these plants and keeping production up, we'll stay in good shape, and we should get to the point, if not this week, in the next couple of weeks, to where we're actually gaining some ground, and we'll start making up some of those cattle that are waiting in line and backed up quite a bit. But your slaughter for last week estimated at 636,000. That's important. Anything over 620 is normal. You get over 600, you're feeling better about things, but that's the first time we've gotten over 600 since this pandemic really started taking effect. But 636,000, you can't really compare it to the week before because we had that Memorial Day holiday, but compared to the same week a year ago, down 29,000, which is still down quite a bit, but we were having heavy slaughter at that time a year ago. But feeling really good about having that big of a harvest last week of 636,000. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DB auction, based on an 800-pound steer up through your middle 12 states, ended the week at 129.02. That was actually 94 cents higher, almost $1 higher than the end of the previous week. It was hard to judge the trends on your Monday sales because most of them didn't have a sale the previous week. But if you take those out of play, your cash feeder cattle in your auctions last week were steady to $3 higher. And that kind of goes along with your real-time index, almost up $1 there. But pretty good sales there. And these feeder cattle continue to sell really well. I mean, I know you guys might not be completely tickled with what the cattle are bringing, but when are you ever? They're bringing more than we probably thought they would have brought at this time if we had not had the coronavirus. So selling pretty darn well. If you look at your calf prices, were not really well tested around. Most of the calves are either still on the cow or turned out right now. We just don't see big movements of calves. But you can get a hold of somebody like Ellis and Carter Cattle Company there, and you can get some calves put together and get them put in if you want to turn some out off some hay ground that you've already baled there or something like that, and add cheap value to them there. But let's talk about some commodity loads of feeder steers out of Fort Scott, Kansas on Saturday there. Look at these. There's 4 loads here. Commodity type steers, but plenty good enough there. And pretty impressive market there on Saturday, including this one load, 58 head, 891 pound steers, bring 124, and that's pretty darn good for some steers weighing nearly 900 pounds. How about a couple of individual quotes? South Coffeyville, Oklahoma, South Coffeyville stockyards there, 73 head of 667 pound steers, bring 146.10, and the highest quote that I saw anywhere, and it was on some program cattle, if you want to call NHTC cattle, non-hormone treated cattle, just don't give them the implants, if you want to call those program cattle, which they are. But it's St. Onge Livestock, my buddy Justin Tupper up there, St. Onge, South Dakota, 96 head, 813 pound steers, bring 145 bucks. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.